Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. As always, this is your captain, Randy Wright speaking, and I'd like to take this opportunity to personally thank you for choosing to fly the friendly airwaves with us here at our state-of-the-art radio program at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. Well, folks, without any further ado, let's go ahead and delve into the topic for today's program. You know, when we think of history, as I tend to do a lot, as I am a history major from college and an ardent student of history, I'm reminded of the phrase that Andrew Jackson gave in response to the Supreme Court's decision ruling against his efforts to remove the Cherokee Nation from their tribal homelands during the Trail of Tears. And the famous statement was, "The Supreme Court has made their ruling, now let's see them enforce it." The reason he said this is because he knew full well that when it comes to the design of the federal government, pursuant to the clear and concise language within the four corners of the United States Constitution, the judiciary has no enforcement authority. It is the executive branch that executes the law. In other words, they are the ones that enforce. The legislature drafts and submits the law for passing, and the executive branch signs off on it and then executes it through enforcement. Now, I'm sure some of you are wondering why it is that I am bringing this up. Sure, the Trail of Tears is a historical example of a president abusing the powers and authorities enumerated unto the executive branch of government pursuant to Article 2 of the Constitution. But what does that have to do with Biden and today? Well, remember yesterday we handed down that, or not, we didn't hand down, the Supreme Court handed down, and we examined the shooting down of the Occupational Health and Safety Administration's, vaccine mandates and the requirements on American employers with over 100 employees to force their employees to get the jab being shot down by the Supreme Court, aside from healthcare workers. Well, the interesting thing is the Biden administration has already come out with a response to this. They have responded to the Supreme Court ruling by essentially telling private sector businesses to ignore it. This is typical of the Biden administration. Anytime and every time this regime gets shot down, they tell the people to ignore it and that they're still going to enforce whatever they wanted. This comes over from the Bongino show, and it's by Matt Palumbo. SCOTUS strikes down Biden's business vax mandate, but then Biden tells them to implement it anyway. So, we know that the Supreme Court struck down the vaccine mandate for private businesses with over 100 employees in that 6-3 decision that was handed down. And yes, they also kept that healthcare worker mandate in effect for hospitals which take Medicare and Medicaid, which is essentially almost all of the hospitals that are still in existence. But anyway, despite the legal defeat, the Biden administration's immediate response has been to tell private businesses to simply implement them anyway. Biden wrote in a statement, quote, "As a result of the court's decision, it is now up to states and individual employers to determine whether to make their workplaces as safe as possible for employees and whether their businesses will be safe for consumers during this pandemic by requiring employees to take the simple and effective step of getting vaccinated." But here's the problem. Where in the Constitution is it afforded to the federal government to force private sector businesses to vaccinate people or to submit to vaccination orders? This, again, is part of the purview of the general police powers. And again, the general police powers essentially are those which allow the plenary powers of the state, meaning near absolute, to legislate for the health, security, and morality of the people. Aside from federal territories and lands, so the District of Columbia and military bases and United States territories, the federal government does not have general police powers. So essentially what Biden is doing here is ignoring the rule of law and is saying, like Andrew Jackson did, the court has made their ruling, now let them enforce it. And it gets even worse. Let's see how they reacted.
Thank you. My inbox is usually pretty fast, but I was hoping you can give us that reaction to the Supreme Court opinions. And on the substance of the matter there, how much of a blow is this to the administration's pandemic response plan to have the employer mandate part of the testing or vaccination mandate struck or halted, and how will that affect the course of the pandemic?
Sure. Well, I know there'll be the statement from the president that should be coming into your inboxes any moment now. But let me give you a quick reaction. First, let me start with some good news. News that maybe isn't getting enough attention yet. That's our jobs here, or my job.
That's the spin doctor bovine excrement that she's pushing.
Here, I should say, CMS's requirement for healthcare workers to be vaccinated will save the lives of patients.
No, it won't. No, it won't. And why? Of course, this is attempting to spin this defeat into a victory when it is anything but.
As well as the lives of doctors, nurses, and others who work in healthcare settings. It will cover 17 million healthcare workers at...
No, it won't. It's experimental. And the fact of the matter is the Omicron variant is basically like having the flu. And we haven't forced people, other than in the healthcare industry, unfortunately, to be vaccinated for this sort of thing. And yes, while there is precedence for that, I personally disagree with it, but let's continue with what they're saying here.
76,000 medical facilities. The Supreme Court upheld it, and we will enforce that. The Supreme Court's decision on the OSHA mandate essentially means that in this pandemic, it is up to individual employers to determine whether their workplaces will be safe for employees and whether their businesses will be safe for consumers.
Now, here's what she's not telling you. It's that it has always been that way, and it's that the Biden administration was overreaching the auspices of their authority. Now, of course, she doesn't want to spin it that way because that would show the complete extent of their defeat.
So President Biden, you'll see this in his statement, will be calling on and will continue to call on businesses to immediately join those who have already stepped up,
and those businesses should simply say, no, screw you. We're not going to lose our workforce just to give you political brownie points. We're not going to basically walk this back. Not when we took these court cases up in the first place. That's ridiculous.
Including 1/3 of Fortune 100 companies, to institute vaccination requirements to protect their workers, customers, and communities. We have to keep working together in order...
But you haven't been working together at all. I can't stand her. But as you can see, the administration did admit defeat on one thing, however. The attempt to abolish the filibuster. And again, it's interesting here because Biden basically loses his cool.
It's done. I hope we can get this done. The honest-to-God answer is, I don't know whether we can get this done.
No, you don't know a lot of things, Biden. And of course, that's been the problem. That's been the problem with him all along. But what we have to keep in mind with respect to all of this is that they are showing a clear determination to ignore the ruling that was handed down by the highest court in the land, and that this is being done intentionally. Of course, it's being done intentionally because they have always, since he first assumed the mantles of power, and indeed even before that, what he was running on was that of locking down and engaging in extra constitutional behavior, which is unconstitutional behavior. And again, it's showing absolute contempt for the rule of law. But why should that come as any surprise to us when we know, based off of the rather tortured dealings of Biden and his family, the corrupt dealings that they've had, that they don't believe in the rule of law? It has always been rules for thee, but not for me. Do as I say, but not as I do. Of course, this is the double standard that is quintessential with respect to corruption. It speaks directly to the corruption that exists at the upper echelons of our federal government and shows no signs of improving at any point within the foreseeable future. And of course, that makes sense as well, because this gaggle of maggots, and I know I'm insulting maggots, that is in this White House and in this administration is doing everything within their power to double down on their vile corruption and their rampant corruption. And they think that we are all just a bunch of stupid rubes. But we're not. And without that filibuster, I think their push for keeping illegal aliens on the voting rosters is, already doomed to defeat. Just like all of their other efforts should be doomed to defeat. The state should resist these jab mandates that he has been so religiously attempting to foist upon us, so fanatically attempting to foist upon us. And we should stand in solidarity against these things. Of course, we know for a fact that the blue states won't, but that's just par for the course. That's to be expected. But as for the rest of them, no, we don't have to follow him. And I know that red states like Texas and Arizona and Oklahoma and various others are not going to follow the mandates. And I have a feeling that the vast majority of the private businesses aren't either, because otherwise they'd be losing their workforces. Think of the number of cross-country truck drivers, particularly in this time of shortages, supply chain shortages and shortages of things at grocery stores and hardware stores. Paper was a real big, major shortage that impacted my profession and line of work. Those things would be exacerbated because most of the truckers don't want to get the jab and we're ready, willing, and able to walk off the job. What this shows, beyond a shadow of a doubt, is that the Biden administration is an abject, unadulterated failure. Everything he touches is a failure. He is the epitome of failure. And that has, any doubt that goes to that, rather, has been completely and totally removed. This is a major moment of defeat for the Biden administration, and that's not about to change. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for choosing to fly the friendly airwaves with us here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. I hope to see you again on our next program. Please do take care.